Since childhood, you've heard about let there be light. But have you ever wondered what existed before that? Was Earth, with all its complexity and beauty, truly the first world created? Or are we living in a creation that came after others, forgotten, erased, hidden by time and the guardians of the sacred? The truth is, not everything in the Bible is taught in churches. And what you're about to discover may surprise you, because it involves ancient manuscripts, forbidden revelations, and the darkest enigmas of divine creation. Stay with me until the end. You'll never look at Genesis the same way again. Imagine, before light, there was darkness. Before time, the eternal. Before earth, other worlds. Worlds that perhaps failed, that collapsed because they couldn't bear the weight of divine glory, or because they were corrupted by forces not even the angels dare name. This possibility is no mere conspiracy theory. It echoes in ancient traditions and apocryphal books, and even in the silences of Scripture itself. In Genesis 1 verse 2, we read that the earth was formless and empty, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. But what were these waters? Where did they come from? Why were they already there before the light was spoken? Most people pass by this verse without question, but seekers, those who sense something hidden, realize there's a riddle waiting to be revealed. What if I told you that some ancient sages believed in multiple cycles of creation? That before us, there existed spiritual civilizations, celestial worlds, and entire realities that now lie buried in the abyss of oblivion? You've experienced this, that feeling that you've been here before, that something inside you recognizes eternal, even without understanding how. This video is not for skeptics. It's for the awakened, for those who sense a sacred language hidden behind the visible universe. A secret language spoken before the light, before the word. But if other worlds existed, what happened to them? Who inhabited them? And why were they erased from sacred memory? That's what we're going to dive into now. If other worlds existed, what happened to them? Who inhabited them? And why were they erased from sacred memory? These questions aren't just theories. They stir something deep within us. That ancient feeling that there's something greater, hidden, waiting to be remembered. Perhaps you felt this too, a premonition, a strange dream, a memory that doesn't seem to be from this lifetime. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Your insight may shed new light on this mystery. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you yearns for more. So, take the opportunity to like this video. It shows YouTube that this content is valuable, and it helps us continue bringing you revelations like this week after week. And, of course, if you feel like you're part of this journey, subscribe to the channel. This space is for those who want more than ready-made answers. It's for those who want to discover what was hidden and remember what they already knew silently. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this message. Together, we form a community that dares to look at the invisible and hear what has been silenced. But back to the mystery. If other worlds existed, perhaps fragments of them still exist, not just in the universe, but within us. And that's where things start to get even more intriguing. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if you stop and think about it, there's something that doesn't quite fit the traditional narrative. Not everything the Bible is taught in churches. You've probably noticed that there are passages, expressions, silences that seem to hide more than they reveal. And when we look back at the beginning of creation, the so-called beginning of everything, something inside us whispers that it's not as simple as we've been told. Genesis may have actually been just a new beginning, a new chapter in a much older story. Think about it. Why was the Spirit of God already hovering over the waters before light was created? Where did these waters come from? Who or what placed them there? Their presence suggests continuity, not beginning. It's like entering a room where the conversation was already taking place, and you have to reconstruct what you missed by listening to the echoes. The narrative begins in the middle of something, and it is precisely in this something that the mysteries of creation lie, which no one dares to touch. What if Earth, the one we know, inhabit, and revere, is not the first? What if there have been other versions, other realities that preceded ours? Not as science fiction or interplanetary travel, but as cosmic cycles, entire creation shaped, tested, and then erased, not by divine error, but perhaps by spiritual decisions, by inevitable shifts in the balance between light and shadow. Kabbalah itself speaks of this, of previous worlds that were shattered, fragmented, like vessels incapable of containing the absolute light of the Creator. Have you ever felt like certain truths seem cut from history, as if we were reading a book with pages ripped out? This sensation isn't delirium. It's the echo of a spiritual memory that refuses to be silenced. It's the impact of hidden truth knocking on the door of our consciousness. And perhaps that's why so many have sought not just answers, but a new perspective. Because understanding the beginning changes everything. It changes our mindset, our relationship with the divine, and positions us on a different journey. More awake, more aligned, more authentic. It's not just about discovering what happened before, let there be light. It's about recognizing that there's a backstage to this creation, a larger spiritual stage, where each era may have been an attempt, and ours, perhaps, is yet another, a sacred experiment amid the vastness of the eternal. This confronts us, of course, because if other worlds existed, then our foundations need to be revisited, our history rewritten, and that requires courage. Not the courage to face external demons, but the courage to face what pulses within the soul. After all, what role do we play in this cycle of creation? Are we the first to carry the divine spark, or just the most recent? This question may seem uncomfortable, but it is within it that awakening resides. It compels us to seek more and not accept rigid answers. It invites us to listen to the whispers of eternity, where unspoken words carry more power than any sermon. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. If you feel that this quest is also yours, now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because if we truly want to understand the origin of divine mysteries, we need to look with new eyes at that which has always been before us, but which we may never have truly seen. In Genesis 1 verse 2 it is written, "The earth was formless and empty, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." This seemingly simple passage carries an abyss of silent questions. Why were there already waters before the creation of light? What exactly was this void? And even more intriguing, why was the Spirit already hovering, as if observing something that has not yet begun, but also is not yet finished? This initial image is not of a birth, but of a transition, of something that came before, and that perhaps fell apart, collapsed, or was simply hidden. The very structure of the biblical text seems to suggest a hidden continuity. There is no detailed presentation of the absolute origin, but rather a narrative that begins with chaos, with the absence of form, and with pre-existing elements already present in the divine scenario. And therein lies the impact. The Bible does not begin with nothingness, it begins with the rest. And when we understand this, something changes within us. The traditional religious mindset, often shaped by obedience and non-questioning, begins to fragment. And this fragmentation isn't destruction, it's transformation. It's the beginning of a journey toward what has been forgotten, because if the waters were there before the light, then there was a previous history, a hidden truth, perhaps kept under lock and key by those afraid of what it might reveal. It's curious how certain elements are mentioned, as if they were obvious, the waters, the abyss, the darkness. But where did they come from? Who created them? At what point in the divine process did they emerge? The text doesn't say, and the silence here isn't carelessness. It's intention. It's as if the sacred author were handing us the pieces, but without the complete board, a subtle invitation to delve deeper, to discover the behind the scenes of creation, and to accept that the surface rarely tells a whole story. Perhaps that's why so many mystics, theologians, and scholars over the centuries have turned to apocryphal texts, forgotten manuscripts, and oral traditions that didn't make it into the official canon. They realized something had been edited, cut, and recalibrated to fit a safer, more controllable narrative. But the spiritual doesn't fit, it expands. And the more we try to restrict the divine to the pages of a closed book, the more it escapes between the lines. This realization changes everything. It changes our spiritual decisions, changes how we read Scripture, and above all, it changes our relationship with mystery. Because mystery, contrary to what many think, is not the absence of an answer. It is the presence of depth. And Genesis 1 verse 2 is one of the most mysterious and profound passages in the entire biblical narrative, precisely because it doesn't explain, it provokes. It opens space for truth to be sought, not just received. Now, if there were waters before the light, and if the Spirit already hovered before the Word was spoken, what exactly happened before that? What reality preceded Genesis? What worlds existed in the silence between one cycle of creation and another? We're not talking about idle speculation, but a genuine search for meaning, for context, for revelations that illuminate not only humanity's past, but also our spiritual present. Because if creation is cyclical, and if previous versions of reality existed, then perhaps our very existence is a consequence of decisions made long before our time. Decisions that echo to this day, shaping our emotions, our dilemmas, and even our deepest dreams. We are connected to a process much greater than we imagine, and each step on this journey brings us closer to a more intimate, raw, truer understanding of the divine. Write in the comments, that makes sense to me, if this kind of revelation also resonates with your quest. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we delve into the idea of the abyss that appears in the very first verses of the Bible, we enter a territory where sacred words don't explain everything. They merely point the way. And it is in this space between what was said and what was silenced that the greatest revelations occur. The mention of the abyss is not merely poetic or symbolic. It carries between the lines the memory of something that once existed and that perhaps has been destroyed. The Kabbalistic tradition speaks of this with surprising clarity. According to it, before the creation of our world, there existed others, spiritual worlds called realities prior to our own, shaped by divine light. But this intense and absolute light found no ready vessels to contain it. And here comes one of the most mysterious and profound ideas of Kabbalah, the shattering of the vessels. The Shever HaKalim, this theory, holds that, in attempting to manifest itself, God's light ruptured the vessels that were meant to receive it, causing these realities to collapse. Fragments of these creations were scattered throughout the cosmos, like echoes of a plan that failed, or perhaps of a plan that needed to be destroyed so that something new could be born. And if we look at this through the eyes of the Spirit, not just theology, we realize how much this resonates with our own human journey. How many times within ourselves has something needed to break so that another version could emerge? How many times what seemed like the end was merely the beginning of a new phase? This is not just a metaphysical explanation of ancient worlds. It is a reflection of the very dynamics of creation. Birth, rupture, rebirth. It is the hidden truth behind the apparent chaos. Perhaps that's why, even faced with the vastness of the universe, we have this strange feeling of spiritual déjà vu, as if we've already been here or somewhere similar, as if we carry memories that don't belong to this life, but to another existence or another world, one that didn't survive, one that was silenced, one that still pulses within us, like an ancient frequency trying to find its form again. This vision changes everything. It gives us a new mindset toward creation. We are no longer the first, nor the only ones. We are part of a chain of attempts of spiritual realities experienced and reconfigured. And more than that, perhaps we are the bearers of the fragments of these broken worlds. Perhaps each soul carries within itself a part of the original vessel, striving to be restored, reintegrated, and rediscovered. This brings a sacred weight to existence. Because instead of seeing our life as an isolated point in time, we begin to see it as a living link in an infinite line of divine revelations and decisions. And herein lies the beauty. Because this Kabbalah theory, mysterious as it may be, doesn't just speak of spiritual failures. It speaks of purpose. It speaks of a creator who continues creating, even in the face of ruptures. A God who doesn't abandon the process, but refines it. A mystery that doesn't deny the fractures, but uses them as bridges to something greater. And when we connect this with the Genesis account, with the Spirit hovering over the waters of the abyss, everything begins to make sense in a new light. It wasn't the absolute beginning. It was a new beginning on the rubble of something that came before. And if this is true, then our current reality carries much more than we realize. It is heir to the silences of the past. It carries within itself the codes, echoes, and lessons of previous creations. And perhaps, just perhaps, the abyss mentioned in Genesis is not a place, but memory, a spiritual vestige that God chose to keep visible so that we would never forget what has already been attempted and lost. Write in the comments, I feel like I carry something ancient. If that thought also vibrates within you, Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if there's anything even more revealing than the narrative voids of traditional scripture, it's the texts that have been silenced, those that survived on the margins of official history, but carry within them the breath of forbidden truths, books that didn't make it into the biblical canon, not because they were false, but perhaps because they said too much. And when we look closely at these forgotten writings, such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and mystical passages from the Zohar, a new world reveals itself. Or rather, old worlds begin to emerge from the shadows. In the Book of Enoch, for example, we are introduced to a reality that predates humanity as we know it, a time when celestial beings inhabited the heights and the earth was observed from afar, like a stage awaiting its main play. But what many overlook is that Enoch describes what appears to be a previous collapse, a celestial order that was disrupted, a rebellion that tore apart the balance from above and left irreversible consequences on spiritual structures. And this rupture was not merely symbolic. It directly impacted matter, time, and the creative process itself. According to Enoch, some of these beings, the Watchers, descended before humanity existed, and their fall was not merely moral, but structural, as if, by breaking the higher laws, they had hastened the end of a previous cycle, a world that perhaps was not made of flesh and blood, but of energy, vibration, and condensed light, a world that fragmented before ours, and which today we can only access through fragments hidden in forbidden texts and recurring dreams. The Book of Jubilees, in turn, presents a completely different chronology than the one we've been taught. It speaks of spiritual lineages, of previous eras, of a primordial humanity that existed in another configuration of reality. And what's most striking is the clarity with which the text suggests that this knowledge was deliberately hidden, as if there were a force, institutional or spiritual, interested in erasing any memory that anything existed before our beginning. And then comes the Zohar, the central work of Jewish mysticism, with its veiled codes and symbolic language. There, the concept of previous worlds is treated almost as an ancestral lament. Before this world was created, many worlds were created and destroyed, says one of its passages. The Holy One, blessed be He, made and unmade them, as one who experiments with forms until he finds the one that will be the perfect vessel. This image carries profound spiritual weight, because we are not speaking only of construction and destruction, but of divine attempts, of a creation that also learns, that also adjusts, that also decides to begin anew. And so the question that resonates is, why were these texts banned? Why were these records left out, as if they were too dangerous to read? The answer may lie in the transformation they provoke, because when we access these revelations, our perception of creation changes radically. We no longer see Earth as a starting point, but as the most recent of many acts. We no longer see human beings as the first creature, but perhaps as a consequence, or even as an attempt to restore something that was lost. This shift in perspective has an immense impact. It takes us away from the childish narrative of an absolute beginning and confronts us with a hidden truth, that we are part of a line of spiritual experiments. And this, rather than diminishing us, holds us accountable. It makes us realize that we are here to continue an ancient journey, not just to live our lives. We are the heirs to a history far more complex, far more sacred, and infinitely more mysterious than we have been allowed to believe. Comment here. The pieces are starting to fall into place. If this content is also awakening something in you, now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if there is something that precedes even the creation of light, it is not matter nor time. It is sound, or rather, the primordial vibration, the divine word. Before anything had form, color, density, or name, there already existed an invisible movement, an eternal pulse, like a breath of infinity. And it is this vibration that appears in the oldest records as the true beginning of everything. Not, let there be light, as the starting point, but the sound that precedes the word, the silenced charge of potential, the divine breath that resonates in the spiritual void before space even knew it was space. This idea is not merely poetic. It is symbolic, powerful, and spiritually concrete. In mystical thought, especially in the Hebrew tradition, the universe was born not from explosion, but from a word. And this word was not just a collection of sounds. It was condensed consciousness. It was decision, intention, direction. The creative verb does not describe what was made. It is what makes it. It carries within itself the source code of reality. And so, before light there was sound, a sound that is not heard with the ears, but with the spirit, an echo that does not pass, that does not fade, that continues to vibrate in all that exists. The Hebrew letters, for example, are not just phonetic symbols. They are considered spiritual forms, visual manifestations of divine vibration. The Aleph, the first letter, represents a silence before pronunciation, the cosmic tension of what is about to be revealed. Each letter carries a number, an energy, a sound, and together they make up the Tetragrammaton, the unpronounceable name of God. This name, represented by 4 letters, Yod, He, Vav, He, is no ordinary name. It is a vibrational portal, a sound that was never meant to be spoken, but felt, and it is at this point that symbolism intertwines with mystery, because if sound came before light, and if that sound continues to resonate, then everything that exists still responds to it. Creation is not a finished event. It is an ongoing process, a continuous flow of vibrations that shape, break, and reorganize. Matter is nothing more than sound made visible. Light is accelerated sound. The universe is a word frozen in structure. This understanding changes our relationship with the world, because we are not just inhabiting a physical universe, but navigating a sacred sound field. Every word, every intention, every thought echoes in this field. We don't just speak, we create. We don't just listen, we resonate. And this connects us directly to the behind the scenes of creation. We are, to some extent, participants in the same process that shaped previous worlds. The crown of the divine throne, mentioned in prophetic visions and apocryphal texts, also carries this symbolism. It is not only a symbol of authority, but of elevated consciousness. It represents the highest point of creative vibration, the center of original sound. And from there, everything manifests in descending layers, like waves traveling through the ocean of time. When the ancients spoke of the throne of God that moves, they were not describing a physical object, but a dynamic consciousness, emanating sound, vibration, and direction to the entire cosmos. And this is where we return to the idea that sound came before light, because this isn't just a chronological sequence. It's a spiritual hierarchy. Sound contains a blueprint. Light reveals a form. And if you look closely, everything in life follows this pattern. First we feel, then we see. First we intuit, then we understand. Reality arises in the invisible. What we see is always a reflection of what was previously vibrated. This is one of the most powerful hidden truths we can access. And perhaps that's why it's been kept silent for so long. Because understanding the power of the word is recognizing that everything can be recreated, that previous worlds, even destroyed, still vibrate somewhere, and that perhaps part of them is still waiting to be awakened within us. Comment here. Everything begins in the invisible. If this understanding also resonated with you. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there comes a point on this journey when we begin to realize that everything that was hidden was no accident, and that the silence that hangs over the mysteries of creation is not the result of a lack of answers, but the presence of secrets that were deliberately buried. For centuries, kings, prophets, and scholars knew there was something that predated our world, something grand, fragmented, and spiritually dangerous, too great to be revealed to the masses. But this knowledge, instead of being shared as light, was sealed away as shadow. In texts that survived official censorship, there are clear indications that the creative word, the previous worlds, and the very origin of matter were restricted subjects, guarded by spiritual elites, by initiatory schools, by closed circles where the truth was passed on cautiously, not because it wasn't real, but because its impact would be too transformative for still sleeping humanity. And herein lies the key. True knowledge always makes an impact. It changes mindsets, challenges structures, demands internal decisions. And for this reason, it has so often been silenced. Prophets like Enoch, Daniel, and even Isaiah wrote things that today don't appear in traditional sermons. Fragments of these revelations suggest that not only were there other worlds, but that ours began under the influence of a previous history, a kind of cosmic memory that still reverberates deep within the human soul. The Zohar calls this the ruins of beginning, as if spiritual debris existed beneath the surface of reality. But why was it hidden? Because the power of knowledge liberates. And the knowledge that liberates is also that which takes control from those who held it. The institutional church, at various periods in history, not only chose which books would be included in the Bible, it determined what could be remembered and what should be forgotten. And that which touched upon the backstage of creation, the multiplicity of worlds, the primordial sound, was labeled heresy, mythology, or mystical delirium. But neither kings nor councils, nor temple walls could completely erase these revelations. They survived in the chants of mystics, between the lines of ancient manuscripts, in the dreams of seekers. And now, you stand before what has been forbidden for centuries, before a truth that pulses like a forgotten frequency, but alive. And the most striking thing is to realize that many who access this knowledge were persecuted, exiled, silenced, because they weren't just dealing with doctrines. They were breaking the veil. They were entering where only the courageous can remain. It's not easy to face the fact that the reality around us is just one version, that there have been, and perhaps still are, other forms, other worlds, other expressions of the divine. But it's necessary, because once you hear the echo of the word, once you perceive the vibration beyond matter, once you see the signs that were left on the margins of history, there's no turning back. Knowledge doesn't fade. It awakens. And once awakened, it transforms everything. Write in the comments, I am accessing what was hidden. If you feel that something inside you has started to open. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because after everything we've explored so far, the previous worlds and their cosmic ruins, the vibrational echoes that still resonate in matter, the forbidden texts, and the spiritual symbolism that spans the centuries, one question remains. If all this was hidden, preserved in silence, transmitted only behind the scenes of faith, what else is still being veiled? And furthermore, why? This doubt shouldn't paralyze us. It should awaken us. Because understanding that we may not be living the first world God created is more than an interesting theory. It's a spiritual reality check, an invitation to internal transformation. Genesis may not be the starting point, but the starting point, a new cycle after the collapse of other worlds, other attempts, other life forms that couldn't withstand the intensity of the light, or fell due to spiritual choices beyond our current understanding. But if this is true, if there were previous creations, beings who came before, divine orders that fell apart, then what are we experiencing now? Are we the final experiment? Or just another chapter in this eternal journey of manifestation and restoration? Are we here to fulfill something that began long before us? Or to correct what was corrupted in a previous reality? The feeling is that we are in a cycle of reconciliation with the divine, a last attempt to reunite the fragments, to restore the broken vessel. And perhaps that is why so many are awakening now, because the time has come to remember, to reactivate memories that do not belong to this incarnation, but to the essence of our existence. The hidden truth pulses ever stronger, piercing the layers of time, breaking the structures of oblivion, restoring the connection with what we were, are, and will still be. If worlds existed before ours, then nothing is as simple as it seems. Not matter, not time, not even ourselves. We are echoes and seeds at the same time, fragments of an eternal story, trying to find coherence in a temporary reality. And this changes everything. Our decisions, our perception of the sacred, our relationship with mystery. Creation is a living process, and we are within it, not as spectators, but as active parts of what is still being revealed. Comment here. I don't think we're the first. If this possibility also affected you, if you've made it this far, it's because something deep within you recognized the depth of this journey. And if this content touched you in any way, if it sparked a memory, an intuition, or even a new question, subscribe to the channel. This is where we continue exploring these layers that have been hidden for so long. This space was created for this, for those who feel there's something beyond the surface and aren't afraid to seek it. Oh, and if this video resonated with you, please leave a like. Not only does it help, but it also shows that this connection was real. And if you stuck around until the end, comment below. I'm with you until the end. Just so I know who are the ones who walk with me until the last second. There's a video here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this line of revelations. Click and follow me there. There's still much to be revealed.